The little bell above the cafe door chimed as Olivia stepped inside, brushing the chill of the early morning off her coat. The warm scent of freshly ground coffee beans wrapped around her instantly, comforting and familiar. This coffee shop had become her morning ritual long before work, a place where the world felt softer, slower, even if only for a few minutes. She moved through the short line, eyes scanning the familiar chalkboard menu, though she already knew what she'd order. A caramel latte with just enough foam to feel like a treat. It was her daily indulgence, a small promise to herself that no matter how chaotic the day became, there would always be this moment of calm. As she reached the counter, she sensed someone step in behind her. The faint rustle of a jacket, the scent of cedar, and something faintly musky. It wasn't familiar. Olivia glanced back casually, and for a moment her gaze collided with his. He was tall, his dark hair slightly tousled, a few strands falling across his forehead as though he hadn't bothered to tame them. His eyes, a striking shade of gray-blue, held hers for only a heartbeat, but it was long enough to make her stomach flutter unexpectedly. He offered a small, polite smile before looking away, pretending to study the pastries in the display case. "Next, please," the barista called, snapping her back to the present. Olivia quickly gave her order, cheeks warming for no good reason, and stepped aside. She tried to ignore the way her pulse quickened, tried to convince herself it was just a stranger in line, nothing more. But when he stepped up to the counter and said, "1 black coffee, no sugar," his voice was low, smooth, with a hint of something that made her glance up again. She caught his profile this time, sharp but gentle, the kind of face that seemed out of place in the ordinary bustle of a coffee shop. Their eyes met once more, fleeting but enough to spark the tiniest thread of curiosity between them. Olivia found herself looking away quickly, clutching her cup a little too tightly when it was handed to her. It was just coffee, just another morning. And yet, as she pushed open the cafe door, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Something small but undeniable. The next morning came with the same routine. Olivia walked down the familiar street, her scarf tucked around her neck as the autumn wind nipped at her cheeks. She told herself it would be like every other day, coffee, a quiet moment by the window, then off to work. But when she pushed open the cafe door, the bell chiming overhead, her heart skipped at the sight of him. Ethan was already there. He stood near the counter, waiting for his order, one hand tucked casually into the pocket of his dark jacket. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes shifted briefly toward the door as if he had been waiting for something. Someone. When he noticed her, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. His smile was small, almost shy, but undeniably real. Olivia froze for half a second before catching herself. She offered a polite nod, nothing more, though she felt her cheeks warm. She moved into the line, pulling her phone from her bag to occupy her hands, but her attention strayed in his direction more than once. Their gazes met again when he turned to leave the counter with his cup. It was quick, just a glance, but there was something lingering in it, as though both of them had silently admitted that yesterday wasn't just forgettable coincidence. Ethan hesitated near the exit, his hand resting on the door. For a moment, Olivia wondered if he might say something, but instead, he gave her a look that lingered a heartbeat too long, then slipped outside into the morning crowd. Her order came a minute later, and she carried the cup to her usual spot by the window. Yet as she sat down, she found herself glancing at the street beyond the glass, half expecting to catch sight of him again. He was gone, of course, but the memory of his eyes stayed. Olivia sipped her coffee slowly, her reflection faintly visible in the window beside the ghost of his earlier smile. She told herself it was nothing, just a passing familiarity. Still, her chest tightened in a way she couldn't explain, and the warmth of the latte did little to chase it away. The cafe was busier than usual that morning, the hum of conversation filling the space as the line stretched nearly to the door. Olivia found herself in the queue once again, absently scrolling through her phone while the comforting aroma of roasted beans swirled around her. A familiar voice caught her attention. "Black coffee, no sugar," Ethan said to the barista, with the same calm certainty as before. She hadn't noticed him enter, but now he was standing just 2 places ahead of her. Her heart gave a small, unexpected leap. She lowered her phone, pretending to study the menu board, though she already knew what she wanted. When it was her turn, she ordered her usual caramel latte, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. The barista moved quickly, juggling multiple cups and calling out names over the noise. "Ethan! Caramel latte." Olivia's brows lifted in surprise, and before she could process, Ethan stepped forward automatically to take the cup. He paused, glancing down at the creamy swirl of foam and caramel drizzle. A crooked smile tugged at his lips. "I'm pretty sure this isn't mine," he said, turning toward Olivia just as the barista called again. "Olivia!" "Black coffee." She blinked, heat rushing to her cheeks as she stepped forward to claim the cup that was clearly not hers either. Their eyes met, both holding back laughter. "Looks like we've been switched," Ethan said, his tone light, amused. He extended her latte toward her, their fingers brushing briefly as she accepted it. The touch was fleeting, but enough to send a spark racing up her arm. "Thank you," she murmured, trying to mask the smile tugging at her lips. She handed him the black coffee in return. "Guess the universe thinks we should try each other's drinks." He chuckled, the sound low and warm. "Not sure you'd like mine." "It's a little bitter." Olivia tilted her cup, teasing. "Maybe I'll stick with mine then." For the first time, their exchange felt easy, natural, like 2 people who had known each other longer than a handful of mornings. The clamor of the cafe faded around them as they lingered for a second too long before stepping aside. As Olivia settled into her spot by the window, she caught herself smiling into her latte. Across the room, Ethan glanced back once before leaving, his gaze catching hers just long enough to leave her wondering if tomorrow might hold another coincidence. The next morning, Olivia arrived at the cafe earlier than usual, though she told herself it was only because she had woken up ahead of her alarm. The air outside was brisk, her breath visible in faint clouds as she pushed open the door. Inside, the familiar warmth and aroma greeted her instantly, along with something else. Ethan was there. He stood at the counter waiting for his coffee, and when his eyes lifted to the sound of the bell above the door, he spotted her immediately. A flicker of recognition, then a smile. Subtle, hesitant, but undeniably genuine. Olivia's stomach fluttered. She offered him a small smile in return before stepping into line. She tried to keep her focus on the chalkboard menu, but she could feel his presence, the way his gaze lingered for a moment longer than necessary before he turned away. When her order was called, she collected her latte and scanned the room. For the first time, her usual window seat was taken. The only open spot was near the back, at a table just big enough for 2. She hesitated, then moved toward it, only to find Ethan heading there at the same time, his black coffee already in hand. They stopped, almost colliding, both laughing at the awkwardness of it. "Looks like this one's up for grabs," Ethan said, nodding toward the empty table. His tone was casual, but his eyes searched hers as though waiting for her decision. Olivia felt her pulse quicken. "I don't mind sharing," she replied, her voice steadier than she expected. They sat down across from one another, the small table forcing a closeness neither could ignore. For a few moments, they sipped their drinks in silence, the air between them buzzing with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat. "So, Olivia, right? I remember from yesterday's mix-up," she nodded, smiling faintly. "And you're Ethan. Black coffee, no sugar." His chuckle was warm, disarming. "Guilty, though after seeing your reaction I feel like I should reconsider. Maybe add a little caramel once in a while." Her laugh was soft, genuine. "Careful. You might start enjoying life." The words came out playful, teasing, but when their eyes met, there was something deeper beneath them. The tension loosened, replaced by an easy rhythm of conversation that neither of them wanted to end. For the first time, Olivia realized that her morning routine had quietly, irrevocably changed. The following morning, Olivia hesitated before leaving her apartment. She told herself she wasn't changing her routine for anyone, that she simply enjoyed her coffee shop and the comfort it brought. And yet, as she wrapped her scarf around her neck, she found her heart beating faster with the thought of who might already be there. The bell over the cafe door chimed as she entered, warmth spilling out to meet her. She paused just inside, scanning the room almost unconsciously. And there he was, Ethan, seated at the very table they had shared the day before. A black coffee sat in front of him, steam curling upward, his hand absently turning a newspaper folded open on the table. As if sensing her arrival, his eyes lifted. The recognition was instant, followed by that small, familiar smile that sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. He gave a slight nod, subtle but deliberate, as if acknowledging a secret they now shared. Olivia approached the counter, ordered her latte, and when her name was called, she found herself walking toward his table without thinking twice. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, her tone light, playful. Ethan folded the newspaper, pushing it aside. "I was saving it, actually," he said with mock seriousness before softening into a grin. "For you." She laughed, settling into the chair across from him. Their drinks steamed between them, and the chatter of the cafe faded into a distant hum. This time, there was no awkward silence. Their conversation picked up easily, flowing like they had been meeting here for weeks instead of days. They spoke about simple things: the weather, favorite movies, the quirks of their jobs. But beneath the casual words was an undeniable pull. Olivia noticed how he leaned forward slightly when she spoke, how his eyes stayed on her even when she looked away. And Ethan couldn't help but watch the way her hands moved when she gestured, the way her smile lit up her whole face. At one point, their fingers brushed again as they both reached for their cups. Neither of them pulled away this time. The contact was brief, innocent, but it lingered in the air between them, unspoken but undeniable. By the time Olivia stood to leave, she realized she hadn't checked the time once, and as she stepped back out into the cool morning, the taste of caramel and coffee on her lips, she knew it wasn't just caffeine that made her heart race. It was one of those mornings when the cafe seemed to be bursting at the seams. The line snaked almost to the door, voices overlapped in a chorus of chatter, and the clinking of cups and saucers rang like background music. Olivia pushed her way inside, tugging her coat tighter as she scanned the crowded room. Every table was full, Students hunched over laptops, friends laughed in pairs, and strangers occupied every seat, clutching steaming mugs against the morning chill. Her usual spot by the window was long taken, and even the cozy corner table she sometimes claimed was filled. She exhaled softly, clutching her latte when it was finally placed on the counter. For a moment, she considered taking it to go, until she spotted him. Ethan was already there, tucked into the far corner. Only this time, he wasn't alone. A pair of tourists had claimed the other chairs at his table, leaving just one seat open, directly beside him. Their eyes met across the room, and he lifted his brows slightly, as if asking her a silent question. Olivia felt the warmth rise in her cheeks, but managed a small smile. Balancing her cup, she wove her way through the crowd until she reached him. "This seat taken?" she asked, her tone light, though her heart fluttered. "Saved just for you," Ethan replied easily, shifting his things so she could slip into the space beside him. The chair was close, so close that when she sat down, their shoulders brushed. Neither moved away. The proximity sent a quiet thrill through her, the hum of the cafe fading to the background as awareness of him sharpened. They sipped their drinks in silence at first, the press of their arms against each other more intimate than words. Finally, Ethan tilted his head toward her, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Guess we'll have to get used to sharing." Olivia smiled into her cup, her lips curving with something she didn't bother to hide. "I think I can live with that." The morning bustle swirled around them, but in that small corner of the cafe, it felt like the rest of the world had fallen away. What had begun as coincidence was starting to feel like something more. A rhythm, a pattern, a quiet promise written in the space between them. The cafe's background noise seemed to blur into a steady hum, a soft soundtrack to the quiet moment unfolding at their corner table. Olivia rested her latte between her palms, watching the steam curl upward as though it were carrying her thoughts away. Ethan sat beside her, his arm lightly brushing hers every time he shifted, and though the contact was casual, it sent subtle sparks through her chest. It was Ethan who broke the comfortable silence first. "So, Olivia, what do you do when you're not rescuing me from bitter coffee?" His lips curved with an easy smile, but his eyes held genuine curiosity. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "I'm a graphic designer. Mostly corporate stuff, but sometimes I get lucky and work on projects that actually let me be creative." His expression warmed. "That suits you." Her brows lifted. "And how would you know what suits me?" Ethan leaned back slightly, his gaze never wavering. "Because every time you talk about something, your eyes either light up or they don't." And just now, they lit up. The words lingered between them, drawing a flush to her cheeks. She tilted her head, letting herself study him more openly now. "All right, then. Your turn. What do you do when you're not drinking the world's plainest coffee?" He chuckled. "I'm an architect, which means I spend way too much time thinking about buildings no one else notices." "I don't believe that," Olivia said. "I think people notice more than you think. They just don't always know who to thank for it." Ethan looked at her then, not with the teasing playfulness he'd shown before, but with something quieter, more intent. "Maybe. But it's nice having someone to talk to who actually listens." Their eyes locked, and for a moment the bustle of the cafe fell away entirely. Olivia felt the weight of his words settle in her chest, soft and steady. She sipped her latte to distract herself, but the taste of caramel was muted by the awareness of him sitting so close, of the warmth growing between them. It wasn't just small talk anymore. It was the beginning of something deeper, an exchange of truths that neither had expected when they first walked into this coffee shop. The air between them had grown heavier after their quiet confessions, and Olivia felt the need to break it with something lighter. She stirred her latte absent-mindedly, the spoon clinking against the cup, before glancing sideways at Ethan. "So," she said, lips twitching into a playful smile. "Architect, huh? Does that mean you walk around criticizing every building you see?" Ethan chuckled, his eyes sparking with amusement. "Only the really ugly ones. You'd be surprised how many there are." She leaned closer, teasing. "What about this place? Be honest." He tilted his head, looking around the cafe with exaggerated seriousness, the mismatched chairs, the old wooden beams, the brick wall lined with chalkboard art. Finally, he shrugged. "It's not bad. Cozy, kind of charming, but—" He paused dramatically, his grin spreading. "Those ceiling lights are a crime against humanity." Olivia burst out laughing, nearly spilling her drink as she covered her mouth. "You can't say that. They're just lights." "They're fluorescent torture devices," Ethan countered, grinning as he leaned back. "Trust me, I'm a professional." Her laughter rang bright and clear, turning a few heads around the cafe. She didn't care. It felt good, this lightness, this playful rhythm between them. Ethan laughed too, softer but no less genuine, the corners of his eyes crinkling in a way that made her heart flutter. "You're ridiculous," she said, once her giggles subsided, though her smile refused to fade. "And yet," he replied smoothly, "you're still sitting here." She rolled her eyes but couldn't stop smiling, her cheeks warm from more than just coffee. Their laughter faded into an easier silence, the kind that didn't need filling anymore. It felt natural, like they'd been sharing this table for years instead of days. For Olivia, mornings at the cafe had always been routine, comfortable, predictable. But now, with Ethan sitting beside her, she realized she was beginning to look forward to them in an entirely new way. The cafe's low buzz of voices carried on around them, but Olivia found herself leaning back in her chair, perfectly content. Her laughter still lingered in her chest, and each time her eyes met Ethan's, she felt that strange spark of recognition again. As though this wasn't the start of something new, but the continuation of something that had always been waiting for them. Then, a sharp crack of thunder rumbled outside. Olivia startled slightly, turning her head toward the wide front windows. In the space of only a few minutes, the sky had shifted from pale gray to a dark, heavy blue. Rain began to fall in sheets, streaming down the glass, blurring the city into watercolor streaks. Ethan glanced at his watch, then at the storm. "Wow," he murmured, eyebrows lifting. "That came out of nowhere." Olivia let out a soft laugh, hugging her cup a little closer. "Welcome to autumn. It does this, decides you don't get to go anywhere. For a while." Their table was close to the window, and she could feel the faint vibration of the rain against the glass, hear the drumming that drowned out the chatter inside. People passing on the street rushed under umbrellas or ducked into the cafe, shaking water from their coats. "Guess you're stuck with me a little longer," Ethan said, his tone half teasing, half something else. Olivia tilted her head, feigning thoughtfulness. Could be worse. You might actually be good company." He laughed, low and warm, but his eyes stayed on her for a moment longer, as though her words meant more than a joke. Minutes stretched. The rain showed no sign of stopping, and the cafe grew even more crowded as people escaped the downpour. Their chairs were pressed closer together now by necessity, shoulders touching each time they shifted. Olivia felt her pulse quicken at the simple contact, her awareness of him sharpening with every brush of fabric against fabric. The storm outside had trapped them in, but she didn't mind. If anything, it felt like the universe had given them permission to stay suspended in this moment a little while longer. The rain showed no mercy. It poured in heavy sheets, drumming against the cafe windows so loudly that even conversation seemed to quiet, as though everyone inside was caught in the same spell. The glass fogged where warm air met the chill from outside, softening the view of blurred umbrellas and rushing figures on the street. Olivia shifted slightly in her chair, but the space was so tight now that her shoulder brushed Ethan's again. This time, she didn't move away. She let herself feel it, the warmth radiating through the fabric of his jacket, the subtle reassurance of his nearness. Ethan leaned a little closer, lowering his voice as though the storm outside demanded intimacy. "You know, if this keeps up, we might be here all morning." Olivia smiled, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "There are worse places to be stuck." His gaze lingered on her profile, the way her hair framed her face, the soft curve of her lips as she spoke. He caught himself staring and looked down at his coffee, though a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. She turned her head then, catching him in that unguarded moment. Their eyes met, and the silence between them deepened. The cafe's sounds faded into nothing. There was only the rain, the closeness, the steady rhythm of two hearts slowly aligning. Trying to lighten the weight of the moment, Olivia gestured toward the window. "You ever notice how rain makes everything feel different? Like the world slows down, just for a little while." Ethan's voice was soft, thoughtful. "Maybe it slows down so people like us can catch up." The words hung there, heavier than casual banter sinking into her chest. Olivia felt her breath hitch, her fingers tightening slightly around her cup. She looked away toward the window, but her smile betrayed her. Their shoulders remained pressed together, their closeness no longer accidental. Neither of them tried to reclaim the space between. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, something else was building, quieter, more powerful, impossible to ignore. The storm outside showed no sign of letting up. The cafe was buzzing with people ducking in from the downpour, but at their little corner by the window, Olivia and Ethan seemed locked in their own world. The fogged glass blurred everything beyond, as if even the city had decided to step back and leave them this moment. Olivia set her empty cup down, her fingers absently tracing the cardboard sleeve. She leaned back slightly, the sleeve slipping from her grip and tumbling onto the small table between them. Both she and Ethan reached for it at the same time. Their hands met. It was nothing more than a brush of fingers at first, but neither pulled away. His skin was warm against hers, and in that single touch, Olivia felt her pulse stutter, her breath catch. Her eyes lifted, meeting his gaze. Ethan's expression softened, the playful edge gone. He turned his hand slightly, his fingertips brushing along the side of hers with deliberate care. The air between them thickened, their small corner of the cafe charged with unspoken meaning. Olivia didn't move. She let her fingers linger against his, her heart racing faster with each second that passed. The thunder rolled outside, distant but steady, as though echoing the pounding in her chest. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice low and steady. "Funny how something so small can feel different." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, her voice barely above, A whisper. Different isn't always bad. Their hands stayed together for another lingering moment before she finally pulled hers back, not because she wanted to, but because the intensity of it left her almost dizzy. Still, the warmth of his touch remained, burning softly against her skin. They didn't speak for a while after that. They didn't need to. The silence carried more weight than words ever could, and with every stolen glance, Olivia knew. Something had shifted, something that couldn't be undone. The storm outside grew heavier, rain striking the windows in furious waves, but inside the cafe, time seemed to still. Olivia sat frozen in the quiet hum of her own heartbeat, the memory of Ethan's touch still alive against her skin. Their chairs pressed close together, shoulders brushing, breaths mingling with every small shift. Ethan turned slightly toward her, his arm resting casually along the back of her chair, though nothing about it felt casual. His eyes searched hers, steady and intent, as if asking a question without words. Olivia's lips parted, but she found herself unable to speak. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, her pulse quickening with the weight of his gaze. For a moment, the world outside disappeared completely. It was just the two of them, caught in a pause that stretched long enough to make the air tremble. Ethan leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. His hand brushed against hers again, on the table, fingers grazing lightly, steadying her as though to say, "I'm here. Only if you want me to be." Olivia's breath hitched. She didn't move back. Instead, she leaned in too, closing the final inches of space between them. Their lips met. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, testing, but charged with all the tension that had been building between them. Olivia's hand lifted almost instinctively, brushing against Ethan's jaw, her fingertips tracing the faint stubble there. He deepened the kiss just slightly, his lips moving with a warmth that made her chest ache in the sweetest way. It wasn't hurried, nor was it hesitant. It was a promise. When they finally pulled apart, Olivia's cheeks were flushed, her heart racing. Her forehead lingered close to his, their breaths mingling in the narrow space. She whispered, almost afraid to break the spell, "I didn't expect this." Ethan's lips curved into a small smile. "Neither did I, but I'm glad it happened." Outside, the rain poured harder, but inside, all Olivia could feel was the warmth of him, the certainty that this moment had just changed everything. By the time the storm began to soften, the cafe had thinned out. People who had taken shelter slowly drifted back to their lives, umbrellas popping open as they stepped into the damp morning air. The rain was no longer a furious downpour, but a gentle drizzle, the kind that left the world glistening under soft gray light. Olivia and Ethan lingered near the window, neither in a rush to leave. The kiss still hovered between them, fresh and undeniable, leaving every glance heavier, every smile charged. Olivia traced a circle along her empty coffee cup before finally setting it aside. "Looks like it's letting up," she said softly, nodding toward the window. Ethan followed her gaze, then looked back at her with a smile. "Want to test it?" They rose together, slipping on coats and scarves, the bell above the cafe door chiming as they stepped out. The air was cool and damp, the pavement shining with reflections of streetlights and blurred clouds. Olivia tilted, her face upward, letting the light drizzle touch her skin, and for the first time in a long while, she felt completely awake. Ethan walked beside her, close enough that their arms brushed now and then. For a few blocks they moved in comfortable silence, their footsteps falling in an easy rhythm. The city felt quieter after the storm, as though it, too, was holding its breath. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "I don't usually stay in one place long after coffee," he admitted. "But with you—" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "With you, I don't really want the morning to end." Olivia felt her chest tighten, her lips curving into a smile she couldn't suppress. "Good," she said gently. "Because I don't either." They paused at the corner where the street opened into a small park, its trees still dripping from the rain. Ethan glanced at her, his eyes asking a silent question. She answered with a nod, and together they stepped off the sidewalk and into the park, the wet grass muffling their footsteps. It wasn't just a walk anymore. It was something more, an unspoken decision to carry what had sparked in the cafe out into the rest of the world. The park was quiet after the rain, its paths glistening with puddles that mirrored the muted morning sky. Drops of water still clung to the branches, falling now and then with soft taps onto the ground. Olivia and Ethan walked slowly beneath the dripping trees, as if neither wanted the moment to end too quickly. They paused near a wooden bench, the air cool but fragrant with damp earth and the faint sweetness of blooming flowers. Olivia stopped, turning slightly toward him, her hands tucked into the pockets of her coat. Ethan mirrored her movement, his gaze steady, warm, searching her face as though he were memorizing it. "This is where I usually turn off," Olivia said softly, nodding toward a side street that led out of the park. Her voice carried a note of reluctance she didn't bother hiding. Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile, though his eyes stayed serious. "So this is goodbye?" "Not forever," she replied quickly, surprising even herself with the certainty in her tone. She hesitated, then added, "At least, I hope not." The smile on his face widened, gentle and reassuring. "It doesn't have to be." For a long moment they simply stood there, the silence around them filled with the distant chirp of birds and the soft dripping of rain. Then Ethan took a step closer, his hand brushing against hers until his fingers found the courage to lace with hers. Olivia's breath caught, her heart pounding as she let him hold her hand, their palms warm despite the cool air. "I don't usually do this," Ethan admitted, his voice low, almost vulnerable. "But with you, it feels different." Olivia met his gaze, her chest tightening. "It does," she whispered. He leaned down then, not rushing, and pressed a soft kiss to her lips, gentler than the one in the cafe, but filled with the promise of something lasting. When they parted, his forehead lingered against hers, their breaths mingling. "See you tomorrow?" he asked quietly. Her smile was answer enough. The next morning dawned clearer, the storm long gone, leaving the city washed and bright beneath a pale sky. Olivia walked down the familiar street, her steps lighter than usual, though she tried to steady the smile tugging at her lips. She told herself it was just another coffee run, part of her daily routine. But deep down, she knew. Nothing about this morning would be ordinary. As she pushed open the cafe door, the bell chimed overhead, and her eyes instinctively searched the room. And there he was. Ethan sat at their usual table near the window, a black coffee already in front of him, his posture relaxed as though he had been waiting. When he looked up and spotted her, his smile was instant, effortless, and it made Olivia's chest tighten in the best way. "You're early," she teased as she approached, sliding her coat from her shoulders. He tilted his head, amusement flickering in his gray-blue eyes. "Maybe I just didn't want to miss my seat partner." The warmth in his voice wrapped around her as she ordered her latte and returned to sit across from him. This time, There was no hesitation, no awkward glances. She set her cup down and leaned in slightly, her smile genuine. Their conversation picked up where it had left off the day before, only now it flowed with greater ease. They spoke about favorite childhood memories, small dreams for the future, even little quirks neither usually admitted to strangers. Laughter came easily, punctuating their words, but beneath it all there was a steady current of something deeper, stronger, undeniable. At one point, Ethan reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers in a way that felt no longer accidental. Olivia's heart raced, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her hand palm up, letting his settle fully against hers. The connection was simple, but it spoke louder than any promise could. For Olivia, the cafe had always been her quiet refuge. But today, with Ethan sitting across from her, she realized it had become something more. A beginning. The cafe was alive with its usual morning bustle, cups clinking, voices blending into a gentle hum, the hiss of steaming milk. Yet for Olivia and Ethan, the world had narrowed to the small table by the window, where their hands remained linked as though they had been holding on for years instead of minutes. Sunlight spilled through the glass, catching in the streaks left by yesterday's rain, and for the first time, Olivia realized she wasn't watching the city outside anymore. She was watching him. The way his smile curved more freely now, the way his eyes lingered on hers with a quiet certainty, the way every word he spoke carried an ease that felt like home. "I still can't believe we met because of a coffee mix-up," Ethan said with a laugh, his thumb brushing idly over the back of her hand. Olivia tilted her head, her own smile softening. Maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was the universe making sure you didn't get stuck drinking bitter coffee for the rest of your life. He chuckled, shaking his head. If that's true, then I owe the universe more than a thank you. Their laughter faded into silence, but it wasn't empty. It was full of promise, threaded with something stronger than either of them had expected. Olivia leaned back slightly, her heart steady now as if it had found its rhythm. "So," she said gently, "do we keep calling this coincidence? Or—" Ethan leaned closer, his gaze steady, unwavering. "Or we call it what it really is." The pause that followed was brief, but heavy with meaning. "A beginning," she finished for him, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, and in that simple expression she felt the weight of every morning that could follow. Cups of coffee shared, quiet laughter, stolen kisses. Not routine anymore, but something extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. As they sat together in the golden morning light, Olivia knew with certainty. The coffee shop wasn't just her sanctuary anymore. It was where her story with Ethan had started, and where it was only just beginning.